comes from the tail post and sights through the front of the rear cockpit. So mine does not continue up. That's all the further that the line of sight, the beauty line would go. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen people make linkages with ANSI 50 roller chain links. Has anyone seen any problems with that? And my second question is, sometimes, you're looking for turnbuckles and you find stuff new old stock and you can only find like maybe a pin eye end rather than a fork end. And with two roller chain links on either side and a bolt and a clevis and a pin through that, you could turn that into a fork end. Is that a dumb idea?
Sounds good to me.
I have it on my plane. Roller chain links are used in various places, 300 hours, whatever, so they look good.
Okay.
Seems way overkill, it's tough stuff. So it seems fine to do, just based on what I've done.
It caused me to crash in a cornfield over here in 2012.
No kidding.
I'm kidding.
He is kidding. He is kidding.
You know me.
Just don't use a plastic chain.
So pursuant to your question, and I'm going to go here later, AC 4313 would talk about like how to use cotter pins, how to use lockers. That's probably a bigger issue. Use the correct hardware, real hardware with it that's appropriate.
A little bit related, but not quite. Just, I don't know who read my article in the newsletter, but just to share, because we're all going to have it. So I was getting ready to fly this time last year tonight, and sitting next to my plane, and just somebody walking around, and if he's here, I bless you. And he looks, and he's just looking at my cockpit, and he said, "Whose plane is this?" So I walk over, and he's like, "Do you know your bolt here from your aileron control horn is backing out?" And I look, and it's a normal movable linkage. So you have a bolt, you have a castellated pin, you have a cotter pin. The cotter pin had broken off and fallen out. The castellated nut had backed off. The bolt had come out and was being held to my aileron control horn by one thread. And I was about to fly that night. I would have lost my aileron at 500 feet around here. I would have been dead. So after I was done hyperventilating, so I replaced all those. Dan Helsper told me that there's castellated nuts that are also nylon locks, and I had those nuts facing away from me, thinking they'd be protected. What's happening is my pant leg. Every time I get in there, my pant leg's going past it. It's snagging that cotter pin for 10 years. And they broke. Well, that one broke, and then there's nothing holding that nut on. I mean, you can just take those off with your fingers. And I had it facing the other way, thinking it was more protected. Well, I couldn't see it. And my bad, because I had annualed it, so I don't even know what I have. But anyways, I reversed them, castellated nuts with nylon washers, and then just watch that stuff, because it's right by your feet and it snags regularly.
I want to add to that. There's a beanpole built in our area, and within the first 10 hours, the connection to the rudder cable at the rudder bar came off. And it was the running shoe catching the end of the cotter pin, and it came out and the whole thing fell apart. I found the same problem with mine. I forget what I did, but I made sure it wouldn't happen again. So in and around the cockpit, you have to be really careful that you don't snag things and cause grief.
So that's 4 stories I've heard in 2 days on this very same subject. I don't want to take a lesson from that. The 5th story, I had a gentleman that did an EAA inspector come to the house, and he called me on a couple bolt links, and I'm glad to say he patted my back a lot, and we got to talking about it. He was a pit crew for the guy that wrecked in Reno the second wreck ago. That was a nylon insert nut that they had reused on the elevator. and it backed out because the insert had gotten soft. Do not reuse that stuff. Just so 5 stories in like 2 days. Yeah.
You know, I'm just in the middle of my build, but I bought a whole bunch of fine threaded 3/16 nuts from the hardware store just to hold stuff together. So I'm going to take it all apart to varnish everything, and then I'll put lock nuts on finally. That's just what I'm doing.
Just as long as you make sure you do.
Yes, do that.
We talked about that earlier, and my modus of attack on that one was just to buy all the good stuff, and then if I missed one when I was taking it off, I, still had the good stuff.
And I was talking to somebody the other day, just had DAR sign their plane off, and he had used just nylon stop nuts on the entire control system. And the DAR signed it off, and that's a no-no. It has to be a mechanical connection, and the guy signed it off, and he's thinking he's ready to fly.
So we won't talk about who that was. Next. Next question?
Somebody better tell them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, regarding the hydrol and washout. Well, we have an interesting conversation with Brian. He made a very good point, but I don't know, maybe something else, somebody else, some different experience.
I'll just tell them sort of what I said. I have no washout. A rectangular wing stalls from the root out. It's just a natural consequence of the shape of it. You put twist in the wing, you're going to lose some lift efficiency or the distribution. The biggest advantage I see of no dehedral and no twist is you take the tail of the airplane up until the ribs are level, and you can go down that wing from one end to the other with a level and quickly find out if there's any distortion. So, anybody else?
I don't have any dihedral.
I have 1 inch of dihedral, no washout.
I followed Brian's good advice. I have no dihedral, no washout, but I will add something that might be somewhat related. You probably look at most Cubs and Champs, the sitting static, the ailerons are probably between an 1/8 and a 1/4 inch drooped on both sides, and I worked that into my rigging, and I was kind of happy with that result.
Same here. Yeah, I think both my ailerons droop 1/2 inch.
If you wanted to go faster, you do the opposite.
So I think I had some pictures at one time in the V-Pan. I drug a string across the top and I drug a string across the back, and then I got a Ryobi level and shot that string and shot the other string and shot my longerons, so everything was square plumb, perpendicular, straight up and down and level, and that's how I rigged everything, right? So if you start doing washout and those various little pieces, you don't get that privilege, you don't get that simplicity out of it. Just another thought. Next. Can't be everything, guys, there's a million questions. Yes, sir.
What is something that if you were to build another one again, you would never do it this time?
Repeat and both.
Nothing.
The main thing after about 3 hours on my flight up, what I keep thinking about every year is I wish angled back that seat bulkhead 1 inch or 2 and just give myself a little bit less of a vertical thing.
I had the opportunity to build mine twice, so I put the seat back 2 inches like he was talking about. I didn't notice a huge difference on that. At 62, here's the one thing I didn't do, and I would now. At 62, would like to have another inch or 2 on the cabanes, okay? Because I'm getting in okay, but it's not getting easier. I do have a step this time, by the way. When I was 32, I could climb in. At 62, I cannot. Okay.
And the flap, you added the flap.
Oh yeah. I did the fly. I had the 3-piece wing and had the flop, and so that was for construction. The 3-piece wing, because 1-piece worked great. It's just a pain in the ass, you know. What else? I added the trim, a little sexier trim system on that walking beam thing. And other than that, what I would not do is I would not put tall, skinny motorcycle tires on split axle gear again. After 1,300 landings. Yeah, I should be good at it. Here I am not.
You added the bigger gas tank too.
Oh yeah, bigger gas tank, the Gary Booth Tiger Moth big gas tank.
I'm happy with mine, I wouldn't change anything.
He did it.
You know what, I'm kind of like Greg, but if I reflect on something I keep on failing to adhere to, and that's loading my helmet box. And maybe I should have just made it smaller, because it's so tempting when you have that turtle deck on to say, wow, I could go all the way back to that third former and have so much space back there. And I did that, and I convinced myself that I was always put soft, light, fluffy things in there. But it never seems to be the last thing you have sitting next to the airplane when you're loading it up. It's usually 2 more quarts of oil and a toolbox. And what I find every single time on a long cross country is as I'm burning fuel, I completely run out of trim, and I'm always landing with forward stick. And that's my own, I guess, lack of patience in loading the airplane properly. So if I hadn't have put that extra bay in, then I wouldn't have been able to put any cargo there.
A little bit related, but one thing I run into a lot is, and I was guilty of it too, you know, a lot of builders haven't flown. And they're going to build and they're going to get their license and go, and they haven't lived with an airplane. When you're building, don't just think about the building, but think about you're going to live with this airplane, and you want to get to that engine easy. You know, you don't want 60 sexy-looking screws holding your cowling on. You said 20 something. Just think about, make access easy, because you know if you're facing taking 50 screws out to check something that you're a little concerned with, sometimes you won't do it because we get lazy. Or let's just fly, I'll do it later. Make things easy to access, and you're going to live with it for a long time, and you're going to do those yearly condition inspections.
I want to correct what I said earlier. The thing I would have done is I would have made the long fuselage as an option. I didn't know it existed.
Do you make your cutouts for your pass-through for your feet bigger too, so that you weren't having to grab?
No, I mean, I just cut it out to my size.
Yeah, so he said the pass-throughs for your feet, they're alongside the seat. You cut his out bigger. One of the seat changes. Which one of you had? I missed one of you. Yeah.
Macro tail wheel, I bought the lightest one I could find off of aircraft screws, and then they sell a single leaf spring tail wheel mount. I think it's like 1/4 inch thick and maybe 1.5 inches or 2 inches wide. Is that adequate, or does that need to be beefier?
The answer is you can't answer that question, because it depends where you put your main gear. I'm not a fan of pushing the gear forward. I'm not a fan of good brakes on a tail dragger. I'm a fan of the A-frame, original design with the coil spring, and making that thing as light as possible. If you move your gear forward, for whatever reason, to compensate for the weight of an engine or whatever, you can have, I've seen people with nobody in the back seat, you could not lift the tail. I can lift my tail, Scott can lift our tails with one hand. It's not a good idea. So conventional things, what some people think, I sometimes think kind of the opposite.
So just personally, people who are doing leaf springs on a wooden fuselage, I have seen it work, but I've seen 3 myself fail. That's a lot of stress. That's a big moment arm into wood. To beef it up to where it's adequate probably adds a lot of weight back there. The A-frame, it's lateral loads. The A-frame laterally, you're moving the tail around, whatever. it's built, it's a good design. It's not hard to add a tail wheel to that design. But it's in my experience, just seeing it's hard to interface a leaf spring with a wooden structure that's going to take 1,000 landings over 20 years and not loosen itself up, not wiggle, just.
What he said, and the one engineer in this business that I trust, Jack Phillips, recommends the A-frame.
I have a tail skid, so no comment. Tail wheels.
I have an A-frame, and if I could just go back to Brian's comment about brakes, effective braking is for airliners and turboprops, not for light aircraft. You're not using brakes to make Alpha 3 on the runway. You're using brakes to not hit a fuel pump or another aircraft as you're taxiing slow. So the geometry of the gear and everything, which I think I can contribute to Brian's commentary, is, to me, we shouldn't be moving gear forward to allow it to keep the airplane from nosing over because we're braking too hard. We shouldn't have brakes that are that strong.
Yeah, my gear's a little back and my tail's pretty light, and I know it. And I don't brake hard. I actually like it because it's a little better on crosswind. When if I touch down and I'm moving sideways, well, not that it ever happens, but if it did, it doesn't weather vane as much. Real tail heavy plane on the gear you're gonna have more momentum. So there's and I did put it on its nose once. I ran into a runway marker and went up on its nose, but I don't know if something else wouldn't have. So it's not a one size fits all, and there's lots of ramifications when you move that gear around too.
I'd like to bring up a question from them that hasn't been asked, and because I have a strong opinion of it. It's rudder pedals in the back seat. People don't like the rudder bar. I would say that's because you've never used it. It is far superior to rudder pedals in the back for multiple reasons. It is easier to control. It's perfectly workable. It adds all kinds of complications if you add it. So I would recommend not doing that. I know most people won't listen to me, but that's my 2 cents.
So you would have a rudder bar.
Use a rudder bar.
Okay, so Bernie or somebody in the past added to his comments, if you use a rudder bar, you cannot push both feet down and rip off the rudder, right? Because all that, you can break the bolt off right down between your feet.
You can bend the horn. You
Bend the horn,
crush
but
the
you're not going to rip the stuff off the rudder. And that's just less than 1 by 1 back there, right? And so then you can have the front ones be pedals, and you still get the rudder bar thing. The engineering at the rudder bar checks the problem with pulling on both sides at the same time when you freak out and ram both feet down.
There's one more complication, and I've had to help people try to do this, but it becomes very hard to steer a tail wheel with pedals because you've got tension on that, you've got tension, like there's nothing holding anything. So the easiest way to get around the problem is to reinforce the rudder and use horns and back feed it. That was never designed that way. So it's making more and more complications, and I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation on how to do that rudder.
I wrote an article a while ago. It was a long time ago, so a lot of you probably haven't seen it. But if you're building, and this is my experience and thinking about a lot, is talk to different tall flyers, and some guys are like, my plane is swirly, and my plane's just super straight, and mine's super straight, and like, what's the difference? And one of my theories is, and it's worked for me, is when you make your tail wheel control horn, make it the same length as your rudder control horn, because if it's smaller, you've got differential steering all of a sudden, and you're doing this in wind to keep your plane straight, but then all of a sudden your tail wheel is going twice as far because your tail wheel control arm is too short, and so it's not proportional. By making them the same, you've got proportional. So when you transfer from, rudder controlling it to wheel controlling it, it's kind of the same thing.
I agree with you. You can do it another way with a rudder this big in half with a 2-1 reduction in a pulley system. And I won't go into the details, but mine's half. It turns exactly with the rudder.
A lot of conversation around that point. Next. Anybody? Come on. Yeah.
Yeah, regarding this issue of the control horn of the tail wheel and the rudder, something to say about running two sets of cables or one attached to the other?
A lot of conversation around this topic. So I'll throw my 5 cents in with. I ran the cables clear up front to the rudder bar, so my feet actually set between 4 cables, right? Cable, foot, cable, cable, foot, cable. And I have the ratios down that they're talking about, so that I don't wind up with my tail wheel oversteering my rudder, and I don't wind up with this squirrely. Now this is all thought because I don't have mine in the air, right?
One thing again about gear placement. I'm 1-to-1 with the rudder, but my tail's so light that it will slide, so it doesn't dig in. So there's another advantage of it.
I ran my tail wheel control cables up back behind the seat bulkhead and clinched them onto the rudder cables with a spring in there.
I just have 2 sets of cables coming through the rotor bar.
I have a tail skid, no comment.
Mine's exactly the same as Brian's. I copied his flawlessly. One of the advantages to those 2 pulleys is the springs for the rudder pedal are now sitting right behind your seat, so that weight is behind your seat, far forward of the CG. Sorry, much more far forward than the tail. And I want to go back to having a light tail. One of the things to consider too is if you're having trouble lifting the tail because the tail's so heavy, what's it going to be like when the pilot is sitting in the seat? Because there's that much more weight transferred because you're active COG sitting in the pilot's seat of the aircraft. So the whole idea of a light tail, and it's sliding on grass and even on pavement if you use a hard wheel, is it's the controllability of the aircraft. It improves quite a bit because it's more of a subtle input to align yourself with where you want to go.
So I'm the one guy that has flown with the gear to plans and then the gears move forward. The tail is harder to lift than it used to be. The tail is slower to come up on the rollout. It does not fly any different. It does not land or take off any different at all.
Anything else? Next.
I got one.
Yes, please.
With your wheels up at the leading edge of the wing with a 225-pound pilot, you have 130 pounds on the tail.
Come again, please.
With the wheels moved up to the leading edge of the wing, you've got 130 pounds on the tail with a 225-pound pilot, so it does call for a heavier spring.
Is there a question?
And while you're talking about how much heavier your tail is.
Yeah, he's saying.
So I just mentioned how heavy the tail will be.
He's talking about what that weight balance is going to be with the pilot in there and how heavy the tail is going to be.
Yeah. For reference.
Right.
That was a question I had. How heavy is the tail going to be?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Come on. Please.
Going to the subject of wing incidents versus horizontal stab, is it still the general rule of thumb that stabilizer 0 incidents, wing +1, isn't it, I think? Is that what it comes to mathematically?
Okay, I have the 1-inch difference in the cabane
Right, that
and
says
straight, and that's set for a certain speed, right? And if you fly that speed, it's perfectly good. If you're underpowered and flying slower, it's not going to work. If you go too fast, what happens? If you have more power than you need, the airplane, the tail comes up. And then you got a negative incident on the fuselage you've got a positive on the wing, it's just trying to separate it. It's all drag. Everybody else. So it's one speed airplane. Power's not going to change. You're going to cruise at the same speed I cruise with my bottom of my wing horizontal.
Right, but that the 1 inch differential between front and aft vanes is just what sets it.
Yeah, it's like a 75 or 75 mile.
Next question? Oh guys, there's so many questions out there.
Going back to that, what about like say a Corvair mid-range like the 2800? Would that still be an ideal configuration?
I can't answer that.
Yeah, it's fine. Just follow, on that one, just follow the plans. Just use the incidents on the plans. It flies great.
Okay.
Okay? It flies just fine. Don't use tall tires on split gear. It lands squirrely.
Well, I've got to rethink that because I bought some, big spoke wheels from the guy at Aerodromes and
Got 1,500 landings, brother. Just some of them haven't turned out that well.
Okay, I had a couple questions, maybe for the guys that haven't been around. What is your authority? What authority do you build your airplane to? How do you know how it should be built? Facebook. Chad says Facebook right out of the bat.
M18.
Okay, you guys already know I kind of like to give stuff away. This is what your authority is, AC 4313. Anybody not know about an AC 4313? Little document from the FAA. This will tell you that bolts need to go down and or pointed to the rear. Okay, so how the hell are you going to put that bolt down? How are you going to put that bolt down on your strut attach point down at the bottom? You can't do that, right? So the way this talks, you are allowed to put that bolt up because the plan's called for it. AC 4313, if you don't have it, your DAR comes by, he's going to wonder how the hell you built your airplane without this.
Can I add to your comments? I see a lot of questions of people that are building, and they have not done any, no education of themselves. They say, I'm asking this question, but they're already building. I think if you want to build a good airplane, you take some time before you start and you read reference material. Tony Vangelis's books are fantastic.
Yes.
You mean not Facebook, Brian?
Come on. It's so much easier to ask on Facebook.
Who's building a peep hole? There's one. Come get
got
this.
one.
Behind you, yep, you. Come get this. If I forgot to left my phone number in there, do not call me.
Now you know all the mistakes I made.
It's the one, there's 3 of those. When you're in Oshkosh, you can track them down.
Right.
Yeah, I
Get all-
know they're not available in Argentina at all. No
Get
one
seven,
knows what to send.
7 sets for your friends and bring them back.
This is another book. You read that book? You bet.
What is it?
It's Flying in Your Own Wings.
It's mostly metal. It's
Right.
really, really good.
There it is. He's got the man. Right back there. Hand that back to him.
It's written by a Canadian.
Written by a Canadian. The guy knows. I took this compass out because it didn't work because it was sitting down right next to a coil of wire. Who needs a compass? Somebody raise your hand. There it goes. It goes back to him. Guys, appreciate you guys. I also thought I was going to put a clock in my peephole because I thought I was going to live in it. Who wants a clock? There he is. Got some pulleys. I don't remember where these went. I got too many because aircraft spruce would take a month to deliver something and I'd order it a second time. You want those? All right. There they go. They go to him.
Wait, you're at the shop?
I am. Right here. And I thought somebody else might be able to use it. Who's using an 1.5-inch solid axle or an 1.5-inch axle outside diameter? You're going to need some rings to hold the back of the wheel back in there.
Here, yeah.
I got my socks.
Just the size.
I don't know. This is all 3/16-inch steel washers and some little bolts. Somebody raise your hand. Somebody raise your hand.
I found them after a couple of years.
Yeah. 1-inch hole. plugs a William Wynn bona fide oil cap. There it is.